I discovered my boyfriend has been catfishing other women using my photos in private messages, and now he's begging me not to expose him. I'm not even sure where to begin with this, but here I go. My name is Katie, 27F, and I've been dating Jason, 30M, for about 3 years now. We met through mutual friends, and he's always seemed like the perfect guy, charming, funny, attentive, and supportive. At least that's what I thought. We were one of those couples everyone invited. We had our ups and downs, but who doesn't? I trusted him completely, or so I thought, until a few weeks ago when I stumbled upon something that's turned my entire world upside down. It started one evening when Jason left his laptop at my apartment. He'd gone out to grab some takeout, and I was just browsing Netflix when I saw the screen flicker. His email was still open, and a notification popped up from a woman I didn't recognize. I wouldn't have thought much of it, but the subject line caught my eye. "Miss you, babe. When can we chat?" Curiosity got the better of me. My heart pounding, I opened the email. It was from a woman named Stephanie, and she was thanking Jason for a wonderful evening chat. She wrote about how he listened to her vent about her breakup and made her feel valued, and she ended with, "Looking forward to seeing that beautiful smile of yours on video again soon." At first I thought maybe it was spam or some kind of misunderstanding. But something didn't sit right with me. I decided to dig a little deeper, trying to rationalize that it was better to be safe than sorry. I went through his sent emails, and that's when I found a whole chain of messages between him and various women. They were all similar. Messages of him consoling them, complimenting them, and in some cases, things even more personal and intimate. It was as if he was an online therapist, or worse, some kind of emotional seducer. Feeling sick, I clicked on one of the links in an email that led to a private chat platform. It required a password, but I knew Jason well enough to guess it. I held my breath as the chat history loaded, and that's when the real horror set in. There on the screen were my photos, pictures I'd taken and shared with Jason privately. He was using them to pose as Kate, his online alias, to lure women into talking to him. My own face was staring back at me, smiling at strangers with flirty captions I'd never written. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I realized what was happening. He was using my identity, my photos, my life, to catfish other women. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. Why would he do this? And how long had he been carrying on these conversations, these lies? By the time Jason returned with the food, I'd gone through enough chat logs and emails to piece together the horrifying truth. He'd been using my likeness to cultivate these relationships with at least half a dozen women over the past year. They all thought they were talking to a woman named Kate, a quirky, adventurous, fun-loving girl who seemed almost like me. But the woman in those chats wasn't me. She was an invention, a shadow of who I am, manipulated to suit Jason's twisted game. When he walked in, I was frozen, laptop open, staring blankly at the screen. He noticed my expression immediately and asked what was wrong. I couldn't even find the words. I just turned the laptop towards him, letting him see the messages I'd found. His face went pale, and he stammered, starting to reach out to close the laptop. "Katie, let me explain," he said, but I felt fury bubbling up inside me. I told him to sit down and tell me exactly what was going on, or I'd take his laptop and phone and go straight to the police. Jason's shoulders slumped, and he looked at me with those wide, apologetic eyes I'd seen 1,000 times before, the ones he used whenever he forgot our anniversary or made some careless mistake. But this was no minor slip-up. This was a betrayal on a level I never imagined. He tried to explain it away, claiming it was just a game, that he was bored and lonely, and that none of it meant anything. He swore he'd never actually met up with any of these women, and that it was all just for fun. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. For fun? I demanded. "You stole my photos, my identity, and used it to manipulate other women? You think that's fun?" He looked genuinely panicked, pleading with me not to tell anyone, especially our friends and family. He insisted he'd delete everything, that it would never happen again. But I couldn't even look at him. Every word he said only deepened the wound, adding another layer of deceit to the nightmare I'd uncovered. How could I ever trust him again? How could I go back to being the woman who loved him, the woman who had no idea what he was capable of? The rest of that night passed in a blur. I threw him out of my apartment, told him I needed time to think. But as soon as the door closed behind him, I sank onto the floor, feeling the weight of his betrayal crash down on me. The man I thought I knew, the man I'd shared my life with, had twisted my identity into some kind of sick fantasy. And now he was begging me to keep it all a secret, as if this was just a minor inconvenience, a wrinkle he could smooth out with promises he had no intention of keeping. I spent the next few days in a daze, cycling through shock, anger, and despair. Part of me wanted to expose him, to tell the world what he'd done. But I couldn't shake the feeling that revealing this would destroy not just him, but also me. It wasn't just my relationship on the line, it was my reputation, my sense of self. He dragged me into his twisted game without my consent, and now I was left to pick up the pieces, wondering how I could ever move forward from this. After a sleepless night, I decided I needed more answers. My heart was a storm of emotions, rage, disgust, betrayal. But somewhere in the mix, there was a flicker of morbid curiosity. I needed to know why. What drove Jason to such a dark, twisted place? How could he lie so deeply, so convincingly, right to my face? I messaged him, telling him to meet me at a cafe we often visited. It was a public place, and I didn't want to risk him trying to manipulate me in the privacy of my own home again. He agreed, clearly relieved that I hadn't gone straight to our friends or, worse, the police. He arrived looking haggard, eyes red-rimmed, as if he hadn't slept any more than I had. I almost felt the flicker of sympathy, but it was quickly doused by the memory of those chat logs. We sat down, and before he could launch into his "I'm sorry, please forgive me" routine, I cut him off. "I want the truth, Jason," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "All of it. No lies, no excuses." He swallowed hard, glancing around nervously. I could tell he was stalling, trying to figure out which version of the truth I'd tolerate. Finally, he sighed and started talking. He told me about how it had all started as a joke, something to pass the time when he was bored. He claimed he created a profile with one of my pictures on a whim, just to see what would happen. But then he saw how quickly the attention rolled in, how easy it was to draw people in by pretending to be me. It was addicting, he admitted, his voice barely audible. People wanted to talk to me, to Kate. They opened up to me, shared things they'd never tell anyone else. It felt powerful. I felt seen in a way I hadn't in a long time. I stared at him, hardly able to believe what I was hearing. Seen? I spat, barely able to contain my anger. "You used my face, my identity, to make yourself feel better? You had no right." He flinched, looking down at his hands. "I know, Katie. I know it was wrong. I knew it the whole time. But by then, I couldn't stop. It was like I dug myself into this hole, and no matter how much I wanted to get out, I just didn't know how." My chest ached with the weight of his words. I'd shared so much of myself with him, trusted him with my deepest fears and insecurities. And here he was, telling me that he'd felt empty enough to betray me, to drag my very identity into his twisted games. "Why didn't you just talk to me?" I asked, my voice cracking. "You say you felt alone, but I was right there, Jason. I was always there." He looked away, ashamed. "I didn't want you to know how messed up I was. I didn't want you to see this side of me. I guess I thought I could keep it separate, that I could keep it from hurting you." His words hung in the air, each one a dagger twisting deeper into my heart. I wanted to scream, to tell him how absurd that was, how delusional he was to think that he could keep something like this a secret forever. But instead, I sat there in silence, letting the weight of everything he'd said crush me. "Do you realize what you've done?" I finally asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. "You violated my trust, my privacy, everything. Those women think they know me. They think I'm some kind of fantasy you created. And now I have to live with that." He nodded slowly, tears brimming in his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Katie. I'll do anything to make it right. I'll delete everything, cut off contact with everyone. Just please don't tell anyone. Please don't ruin me." That's when I realized just how pathetic he truly was. Even now, he wasn't begging for forgiveness because he felt remorse. He was begging me to protect him, to keep his secrets so he could go on with his life unscathed. I felt a wave of disgust wash over me, and I stood up, ready to leave. "I need time to think," I said, my voice cold. "But don't you dare think for a second that you can manipulate me into protecting you. You took everything from me, Jason. Don't expect me to save you now." As I turned to walk away, he reached out, grabbing my hand. His touch felt like poison, but I forced myself to stand still, to listen to whatever last, desperate plea he had left. "Katie, please," he begged, his voice raw with desperation. "If you expose this, I'll lose everything, my job, my family, everything I've worked for. I know I messed up, but I don't deserve to lose my whole life over this." I stared at him, barely able to comprehend the depth of his selfishness. He destroyed my sense of safety, my ability to trust, and now he wanted me to keep his dirty secret because he was afraid of the consequences. You should have thought about that before you started this, I said, my voice shaking with rage. You brought this on yourself, Jason. I owe you nothing. I pulled my hand away, leaving him sitting there, alone and broken. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt a strange sense of relief. I'd confronted him, seen the depths of his depravity, and now I knew exactly who he was. A coward, a manipulator, a man who valued his own comfort over my well-being. And no matter what he begged, I was done protecting him. After leaving the cafe, I spent the next few days in a haze, cycling through anger, heartbreak, and a hollow numbness. I blocked Jason on everything, wanting nothing more to do with him, but it was hard to shake the sense of violation. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw the face he used to deceive countless women, my own identity twisted into his sick fantasy. I didn't know how many people he'd tricked, how far his lies had spread, or even if he'd truly stopped. The uncertainty gnawed at me, and I knew I couldn't let this go. One evening, as I scrolled through social media, I received a direct message from a woman named Rachel 28F. I didn't recognize her profile, but something about her message made my stomach drop. Hey Katie, I know this is weird, but I think we need to talk. It's about Jason. I hesitated, feeling the familiar anger bubble up, but curiosity got the better of me. I replied, asking her what she knew. Within moments, she was typing a response, and I braced myself for what she would reveal. Jason and I have been talking for a few months, she wrote, or at least I thought it was Jason. He was using your pictures, pretending to be someone else. I found out recently, and I didn't know who else to reach out to. I thought you should know. My heart raced as I read her words. Another woman he'd duped, another life he'd pulled into his web of lies. I messaged her back, asking if she could share more details, and she agreed to a video call. When she appeared on the screen, she looked as shattered as I felt, her face lined with a mixture of anger and betrayal. I don't know how to say this, Rachel began, her voice shaking slightly. He pretended to be Jake, said he was you actually. He even sent pictures of your apartment, your car, everything. He made it seem like it was all part of this, I don't even know, some fantasy life he created. I could feel my blood run cold as I listened, horrified at the extent of Jason's deception. Not only had he been using my images, but he'd woven them into an elaborate story, crafting a twisted version of my life to lure women in. It was worse than I'd imagined, and I suddenly felt a wave of nausea at how deeply he violated my privacy. Did he ever say why he was doing it? I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. Rachel nodded slowly, her expression darkening. He told me he'd been in a relationship with you, but that you were unstable, that you'd left him and he just wanted to feel close to you. It was like he was trying to make me sympathize with him, to pity him. A sick feeling twisted in my gut as I realized the full extent of his manipulation. He painted me as some kind of villain, using that narrative to make himself seem like a victim, a wounded man just looking for solace. I felt a surge of rage, but underneath it, there was something else, an icy resolve. He tried to turn me into a character in his sordid drama, but I wasn't going to let him control the narrative anymore. Rachel, I said, leaning closer to the screen, I'm not the person he made me out to be. He's been lying to you, and to who knows how many others. We can't just let him keep doing this. She nodded, a fierce determination in her eyes. What do you have in mind? Over the next few days, Rachel and I worked together to uncover more about Jason's double life. She reached out to a few other women he'd catfished, and one by one, they came forward, each sharing their stories of deceit and manipulation. I learned that he'd used variations of my name, twisting details of my life to create personas that fit whatever narrative he needed to reel them in. He'd fabricated entire relationships, sending personal photos he'd taken without my knowledge, making them believe they knew me. As the stories poured in, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Jason had built his house of lies on the foundation of my identity, but now we were going to tear it down. I gathered every message, every photo, every piece of evidence the women had shared, compiling a digital dossier of his betrayals. I knew that simply confronting him again wouldn't be enough. He needed to be exposed for who he truly was. But even as I worked with Rachel, I couldn't shake the gnawing sense that there was still more to uncover. I'd scored Jason's old messages and photos, but something nagged at me, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It felt like he'd hidden more than just his online persona, like there were layers to his deceit that went deeper than I'd imagined. One night, unable to sleep, I decided to dig further. I hacked into an old laptop he'd left at my apartment months ago, one he'd insisted was just for work. As I navigated through his files, I stumbled upon a hidden folder. My pulse quickened as I opened it, revealing hundreds of chat logs dating back years. These weren't just messages with random women. They were conversations with people I knew, mutual friends, acquaintances, even colleagues of mine. He'd been playing puppet master, manipulating people's perceptions of me, spreading lies to drive a wedge between me and those closest to me. There were emails where he'd impersonated me, sending scathing messages to friends, making me out to be petty, vindictive. I could see, in real time, how he'd engineered my isolation, planting seeds of doubt in everyone around me. I realized with a sickening clarity that he'd been sabotaging my life long before I'd even caught on. My hands trembled as I closed the laptop, a hollow rage settling over me. This wasn't just a man who'd betrayed me. He tried to dismantle my life, piece by piece, manipulating everyone I cared about. And now I had all the evidence I needed to expose him, to make sure he couldn't do this to anyone else. I called Rachel, filling her in on what I'd found, and together we began planning our next move. We were going to make sure Jason paid for every lie, every betrayal. It was time to turn the tables, and I was ready to see him fall. The plan Rachel and I devised was simple but ruthless. We'd gather all the women Jason had manipulated, anyone who'd been affected by his lies, and confront him directly. I was done letting him control the narrative, and it was time to force him to face the consequences of his actions. Rachel reached out to the other women, and soon we had a group of nearly a dozen people who'd all been deceived by Jason's web of lies. Each one of them had a story, a way he used them, betrayed them, and left them questioning their own sanity. I'd never felt such a fierce kinship with strangers before, all united by a shared betrayal, each of us determined to bring Jason to justice. We arranged to meet at a public cafe where he often hung out. It was a place where I'd joined him countless times, where he casually chatted about our future, all the while spinning a different future with someone else. The irony wasn't lost on me, and it fueled my resolve. We coordinated the timing, planning to confront him when he least expected it. The day of the confrontation, my stomach was in knots. I felt a mix of anger, fear, and exhilaration as I approached the cafe. Rachel and the others were already there, each one with a hard expression, eyes filled with determination. We waited outside, strategically positioned so we'd catch him off guard the moment he arrived. Finally, I spotted him strolling down the sidewalk, completely unaware of the ambush awaiting him. He was on his phone, laughing at something, his demeanor casual and carefree. The sight of him filled me with rage, and I clenched my fists, willing myself to stay calm. When he reached the cafe entrance, Rachel and I stepped forward, blocking his path. He looked up, his expression shifting from confusion to shock. He glanced around, noticing the other women circling him, and a flash of fear crossed his face. What's going on?" he stammered, trying to keep his cool. I took a step closer, my voice steady but laced with anger. "You know exactly what's going on, Jason. We know everything. Every lie, every deceitful game you've played, every woman you've manipulated." He looked at each of us, his face paling as he realized the extent of his exposure. "This is ridiculous," he scoffed, attempting a weak laugh. "You're all overreacting." Rachel stepped forward, holding up her phone, displaying the messages he'd sent her. "Really? So this is an overreaction? Telling me you love me while pretending to be someone else? Using Katie's photos to make me feel sorry for you?" His eyes darted from me to Rachel, then to the others. He tried to backpedal, raising his hands in mock surrender. Okay, look, I know I made some mistakes, but mistakes?" I cut him off, my voice shaking with fury. "You didn't just make mistakes, Jason. You used my photos, my life, my entire identity to play sick games with these women. You ruined friendships, drove wedges between me and people I cared about. This isn't just a mistake. It's a calculated, manipulative betrayal." The other women joined in, each voicing their grievances, their anger spilling out in a torrent of accusations. They showed him the screenshots, the chat logs, the lies he'd fed each of them. He tried to deny it, stumbling over his words, but the weight of the evidence was undeniable. His mask of arrogance cracked, revealing the coward beneath it. Desperation flashed in his eyes as he turned to me. "Katie, please, you have to understand. I was lost. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just, I don't know, trying to find something, but I love you. I swear, I love you." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Love? You don't know the first thing about love, Jason. You don't love anyone but yourself. All you care about is control, about manipulating people, making them dance to your tune. But guess what? I'm done being part of your sick game." He reached out, trying to grab my hand, but I stepped back, my voice cold. "This is over, Jason. You're done." One of the women, A quiet, reserved girl named Emily stepped forward, her voice steady. "We've reported everything to the police. Catfishing, identity theft, fraud. It's all documented. You're going to pay for what you've done." The color drained from his face as he realized we weren't bluffing. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. I could see the fear settling in, the dawning horror that his carefully constructed world was collapsing around him. I felt a wave of satisfaction watching him squirm, knowing he was finally facing the consequences of his actions. But it wasn't enough. He needed to be exposed to everyone he'd manipulated, everyone who believed his lies. I turned to Rachel and nodded. She pulled out her phone, opening a live stream we'd set up to broadcast the confrontation. People from his social circles, family, mutual friends. Everyone was watching. We laid out the evidence, the screenshots, the photos, making sure his web of lies was unraveled for all to see. He tried to run, but the others blocked his path, forcing him to face the camera. There was no escape, no way to wriggle out of the mess he'd created. We cornered him, and now he was left with nothing but the shattered pieces of his own deceit. As the livestream ended, I looked him in the eye one last time, a sense of finality settling over me. "You don't get to manipulate anyone else, Jason. Not anymore. We've taken back our lives, and you're left with nothing." Without another word, I turned and walked away, Rachel and the others following. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew he was standing there, alone, his empire of lies crumbling around him. And I finally felt free, knowing I'd taken back control of my own life, and that he'd never have power over me again. In the days following the confrontation, the fallout from Jason's exposure spread like wildfire. The livestream had reached far beyond our immediate circle. Friends, family, coworkers, and even casual acquaintances had seen it. Jason's reputation was irreparably destroyed, and people who once admired him or saw him as a charming, likable guy now wanted nothing to do with him. I received messages from people who'd been fooled by his facade, all expressing shock and disbelief. Some apologized for ever doubting me, realizing too late that they'd been manipulated as well. Others were simply stunned, unable to reconcile the charming person they thought they knew with the predator who deceived so many. It was satisfying to watch his carefully curated social circle crumble, leaving him isolated and despised. Jason, however, wasn't done. Desperation breeds recklessness, and he tried to reach out to me, to Rachel, and to anyone else who would listen. His call started as pleas. He begged for forgiveness, claiming he'd never intended for things to go this far. But when he realized his apologies were falling on deaf ears, he grew angry, shifting from remorse to threats. He sent me a long, rambling message one night, accusing me of ruining his life. He claimed I was overreacting, that I'd blown everything out of proportion. He blamed me for his downfall, saying I'd driven him to act this way by not giving him enough attention, by being distant. It was a pathetic attempt to rewrite the narrative, to paint himself as the victim. I read the message with a mix of disgust and pity. He still couldn't see the truth, still clung to the idea that he could manipulate his way back into control. I blocked his number and warned Rachel and the others to do the same. We had no intention of letting him weasel his way back into our lives. But he didn't stop. He created new accounts, sending messages from unfamiliar numbers, each one more desperate than the last. He threatened to sue for defamation, claimed he'd take us all down with him. At first, the threats rattled me. I wondered if he could somehow find a way to twist the story, to drag us into a legal battle. But then I remembered the mountain of evidence we compiled, the meticulous documentation of every lie, every manipulation. He had no ground to stand on, and deep down, I knew he was grasping at straws. I called my lawyer and explained the situation. They assured me that Jason's threats were empty, that he had no case and would likely face consequences if he pursued it further. They advised me to file a restraining order, a step that brought me a sense of security I hadn't felt in a long time. It was as if a weight had been lifted, and I could finally start to breathe again, free from the shadow he'd cast over my life. Rachel and I continued to support each other through the fallout. We met regularly, sharing updates and offering encouragement. She'd become more than just an ally in this fight. She'd become a true friend, someone who understood the depth of betrayal and the toll it takes. Together, we decided to turn our experiences into something positive. We started a blog, sharing our stories and offering advice for others who might be caught in similar situations. It was cathartic, a way to reclaim our voices and find strength in our vulnerability. The blog took off faster than we expected. People from all over the world reached out, sharing their own stories of betrayal, thanking us for giving them a platform to feel heard. It was a reminder that we weren't alone, that our pain had meaning, and that we could use it to empower others. We wrote about red flags, about recognizing manipulation, about trusting your instincts when something feels wrong. It became a passion project, one that grew into a community of people who'd been through similar experiences, all supporting each other in their journeys to heal. Jason, on the other hand, faded into obscurity. The last I heard, he left town, unable to bear the scrutiny and disdain that followed him everywhere. His family disowned him, his friends abandoned him, and he became a pariah, a cautionary tale of deceit and betrayal. I found a sense of closure in knowing he'd lost everything. But it wasn't revenge that fueled me anymore. It was a desire to rebuild, to reclaim my life on my terms, free from the poison he'd injected into it. Months passed, and with each day I felt stronger, more grounded. I returned to my old hobbies, reconnected with friends I'd distanced myself from, and focused on building a future that was truly mine. The scars Jason left behind would always be there, a reminder of the darkness I'd endured, but they no longer defined me. I'd survived, and in doing so, I'd discovered a resilience I never knew I had. One evening, as I sat down to write a new post for the blog, I received a message from Rachel. She'd just gotten engaged, a beautiful, happy milestone that filled me with genuine joy. She thanked me for helping her find the strength to trust again, to open her heart to love after all the pain. Her words reminded me that we'd both come a long way, that we'd turned our darkest moments into something meaningful. I smiled, a sense of peace washing over me as I replied. We'd taken back control of our lives, reclaimed our voices, and built something powerful from the ashes of our betrayals. Jason's deception had nearly broken us, but in the end, it had only made us stronger. And as I looked forward, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them, armed with the knowledge that I was finally truly free.